everybody. How's it going? It's Carpo here again, and I'm in the bus, so it's kind of an interesting place to do a video, but I wanted to do a video about herbs. And I was actually going to do this yesterday, so I had all these sitting out here, and I ended up not getting into it, and I thought, well, I set everything up, so I might as well make the video. I wanted to talk about some of my favorite herbs, and why I find them useful, but also I wanted to start off by talking about the reason why I'm very wary about recommending certain herbs to people or giving them advice or talking about these like they're miracle cures for anything. And that includes all herbs, spices, medicines, kratom, cannabis, all of these. It seems that, first off, there's a lot of hate towards natural medicine, and it's even called alternative medicine by the mainstream because it's considered that, you know, if you're taking natural remedies for your illness, then it's considered alternative. I find that interesting, but I can understand the mindset of people who grew up thinking the pharmaceutical industry knows best. I've grown up with a pretty fair, balanced assessment of realizing that there are certain medications that are life-saving out there, and that without some of the pharmaceutical drugs that we've created, then we would still have horrible infections. Sure, we wouldn't be in the problem with, you know, staph-resistant, you know, infections, but regardless, we've done pretty good at creating our own medicines and developing cures for things, or at least trying to ease the pain that we have and trying to ease some of the symptoms. Now, the one thing that I've found is that charlatans take advantage. Charlatans take advantage of the herbal market, and they're the ones that make us all look bad. So, from the outside, I've tried to look at it as a person who supports herbal remedies for all different types of things. I've tried to look at it from the other perspective and say, okay, how does this appear from the outside to someone who, say, trusts just pharmaceuticals? Well, they find out herbs are inconsistent. Many of the products don't even contain what the labels say they do. There are a lot of people ripping folks off. They did a bunch of tests of herbal remedies and found up to 30% of them didn't even contain the listed ingredients they claimed. And a lot more didn't contain the amounts listed. So another thing is it's very difficult to determine the value of a plant or a fungi. So I wanted to get into, first off, some of the ones that I've found useful. I have a couple lists of notes that I wanted to go off. I should just do the notes first. Basically, your body changes over time. So what used to work for you might not work anymore. And it is difficult to gauge potency and efficacy of some of these herbs, especially if you're used to taking a medicine that's a very specific dosage. Different amounts, different levels of compounds within what you're taking can, they can vary by harvest, Every kratom connoisseur knows that. But there are people like Dr. Oz and Dr. Axe and some of these other bullshit doctors out there who are trying to sell you on all these new miracle herbs and cures. The thing is, you'll realize that all of these guys get there after the fact. They're just capitalizing on an already popular substance. And there are a lot of fad herbs and fad diets. I don't know who ends up pushing these things. It's probably the herb producer. Hey, let's say this cures this, and antioxidants are the answer to all your woes. There's no way to really determine the value of a plant until you've tried it and you understand it. And I'll give credit to the science, which has allowed us to understand these plants better and which constituents actually benefit us. So it's no longer a mystery. Some of the identification characteristics of wild plants would be, say, bitterness, which would tell you that they may have alkaloids in it. And alkaloids can be good for a variety of different things. What is the smell like? Different fruity smells and spicy smells, those are caused by terpenes. And terpenes can be very beneficial for a variety of different uses in the body. They have potential for moderating, even the different terpenes in cannabis can moderate the effect. And I would imagine they are modulators of many things we don't understand yet. But the color of a plant, which part of the plant are you using? A lot of people will say, I'm selling ashwagandha. Well, what if it's just ashwagandha leaves? The root is what you want, right? Well, the leaves have their own benefits too. With the mushroom extracts that I take, how do you know if it's the mycelium or the fruiting body? Which part of the mushroom? And a lot of you are probably scratching your heads going, what does the mycelia or fruiting body even mean? And that's the thing, the average consumer just doesn't understand. And there's always somebody there to tell you, that, oh, this is the best thing that you could possibly take. So another thing about plants is, what is their relation to other plants? Are they a fungus? Do they have a parasitic relationship with their host? Do they have a host? Do they have, are they green or are they white? Like, for example, Monotropa uniflora, which I'll get into that in a minute. But I guess what I'm trying to get at here is, look at all angles. If you need a medicine for whatever you may be wanting it for, and honestly there's the three big ones, which is what most people: pain, anxiety, depression. And unfortunately, a lot of people are in pain, and with that comes anxiety and depression. And anxiety and depression can cause pain, and it on down the list. So listen to every angle. Listen to your body. Herbs aren't the answer to everybody's problems, but some of them have amazing compounds within them. So what I'm going to share here first, I have some of my favorite mushrooms first is chaga. Chaga is an amazing mushroom. It contains betulin. So this particular one has 10% beta-glucans and 2% triterpenes. Now, triterpenes have been found to have major benefits as well in the lab for, fighting cancer and a variety of other we're still learning about these things, but basically what you're doing is looking at the fungus. Where does it grow? Chaga grows on a tree. It has to resist a lot of different parasites and other fungi. The reason why many of these mushrooms are good for the immune system is because they have to protect themselves. And the fact is, we're closer related to fungi than they are to plants. People don't know this, but the DNA in fungi is not the same as the plant kingdom. It's actually closer to humans. It's an interesting thing. But so the next one is lion's mane. Now, lion's mane is something that's taken for a completely different reason. The stuff I take is 30% polysaccharides and 15% beta-glucans. The beauty with mushrooms is you can take them in capsules, you can take them in teas, a million different ways. The last one I have is red reishi extract. But the one thing, I just wanted to point out a few things about mushrooms. If you're going to take mushrooms, first, take an extract. Do not buy just raw mushroom product. It won't work. The cell walls are made of chitin. Chitin's the same material that insects make their shells out of, and your body cannot break down that chitin. So the extract process breaks the cell walls open and reveals the polysaccharides, beta-glucans, triterpenes, sesquiterpenes, whatever. And your body needs that because it's much more difficult for it to do it on its own. So buying an extract can definitely benefit in that way. Some of them are good for the immune system. Lion's mane is particularly good for the brain. And I don't have all my notes in front of me. I've gotten really into specific things, but it has something to do with building new synaptic connections. And over a period of time of taking it, it helps you to build a better neural network somehow. And there are many other herbs that do similar things, but I've experimented kind of on my own with mushrooms, and I find they're phenomenal. So I'm going to move on down the herb line, because I'll probably end up talking forever if I don't. The next one, which I'm not going to say a lot about, is Pedicularis, which is otherwise known as elephant's head. I don't have a lot of experience with this herb, but it's supposed to have a calming kind of sedative effect, and I've smoked it, I have tried it, and it is interesting, but as a cannabis smoker, I probably wouldn't benefit as much because I just prefer cannabis. But it has a kind of a maple syrupy smell. It's the only way I can describe it. And I guess I should just send this to some of my customers, because I'm probably not going to use it, but for anybody who can't smoke cannabis or wants to try something to calm down, I think that might be an interesting herb for somebody to try. But I just had it out here. It wasn't really part of it, the discussion. Indian pipe, ghost plant or ghost flower, also known as Monotropa uniflora by its Latin name. These are little white flowers that grow, and I made several videos about them years ago. You find them growing out in the woods in these little clusters of white flowers with the yellow center, and they get pollinated by bees, and you're like, I walked out on a walk one day, asked nature, I said, show me your medicine. I was speaking in the morning. I believe speaking to nature does have an effect, regardless of, without getting into that. And so I sat down under this tree at the end of the trail. There was no more trail, and I just kind of sat down and I looked over, and there was this bunch of white flowers, and I saw a bee land and pollinate it, and I was like, whoa, those are white flowers. How do they grow? And I knew right away they must have they either must be parasitic or symbiotic, growing off of the root system between the trees. Fascinating plant. The Native Americans would take this stuff. They would use it in their eyes for eye problems, but they would also use it to calm down. And I've heard of people successfully using this to calm patients who are tripping too hard on LSD. Somebody made a compound of this and tried it out at a festival, and I guess it really helped people out. For some reason, it doesn't remove the pain or remove your experience. What it does, and only a psychonaut might understand this, but it sets you beside your pain and allows you to deal with it in a different way. So the pain's not gone, or the problem's not gone, but you can see it from the outside, which is kind of what psychedelics do themselves, but it's an interesting concept. The next one I have here is Akuama and Guarana. I put these together as kind of a substitute, but they have similar effects on the mu opioid receptor as Kratom does, Akuama does. So I mixed it with Guarana and made these capsules as kind of my Kratom alternative pack back when we thought they were going to ban it. But it looks kind of like a brownish powder. And it comes in as these Akuama seeds, and when the seeds get broken down, into the brown powder, they are so bitter. It's unbelievably bitter. I couldn't get past the bitterness. I mean, so bitter. But it doesn't have the same effect as Kratom. So I didn't want to get into that and start taking it because, I prefer Kratom and I prefer the effects. Another one, somebody who's interested in trying other brain herbs, I guess, would be Brahmi, which is Bacopa monnieri. And I really don't want to talk too much about that one because I use it in one of my blends, which I'll talk about in a bit, but I don't really take it by itself, so I don't have a lot to say personally. The next one is Mucuna pruriens. This stuff is amazing. This stuff in this particular package looks a little bit green, actually, and I bought a bunch from this wholesaler, and it turned out it was like a little bit, the year wasn't that good for the harvest, so it wasn't the highest quality. It didn't look that way anyway, and they told me as much, so I ended up just basically sitting on it and never using it or selling it because it was kind of greenish. But the stuff I usually use is fortified with more L-Dopa. Now, what makes Mucuna useful, besides, has serotonin, has nicotinoids in it, even has DMT in it, but none of these are orally bioavailable, and they're small quantities. The main ingredient it has is L-Dopa, which is, L-Dopa is the precursor to dopamine. So people who are dopamine deficient, say people with Parkinson's, can take Mucuna. It can help them with their levels of dopamine, but it has interesting effects on the average person. I think Mucuna itself has 4 to 5% L-Dopa naturally in the bean. But most of the serotonin's in the outside of the pod, in the hairs, and they're really irritating. What you get is the bean in a powder ground form. The stuff I got was fortified to 25% L-Dopa. And so you take about a teaspoon of that stuff, and it's the weirdest thing. It gives me crazy dreams. It makes deja vu. I get at least 2 or 3 deja vu episodes per day, and they're intense. And it's weird. It's weird. I mean, dopamine is something you don't want to mess with unless you know what you're doing. So I just wanted to mention Mucuna. It has some interesting effects, and it might be useful for people who are seeking motivation, and some people said it even helped their libido. So the next one I'm moving on to is Mormon tea, and I just grabbed this at the last minute. This is the ephedra plant, basically, and I've always found this fascinating, that Mormons don't drink caffeine, but there's actually a tea named after them that, has ephedrine in it. It's really interesting. It's a stimulant, of course, and they can still grow it and cultivate it for their tea usage. I haven't really tried enough of that to get many results off of it, so I don't have much of an opinion. But it's just an interesting herb, worth checking out. The next one is ashwagandha. This is one of my favorites. So I have an ashwagandha extract. It has the weirdest smell. It kind of smells like feet or like old hay or something, and it's pretty nasty tasting. It's strong. But the ashwagandha powder itself, it's always a fine white powder, usually, and it looks like, or in a root form. And it smells like, I don't know, it's malty. It's hard to describe. It does kind of smell like musty or malty. It doesn't taste that bad, but it tastes kind of chalky, so I prefer not to put it in smoothies, but I do use the ashwagandha extract in a blend that I made. And actually, this was the blend that I had it for sale a couple of years ago. It's called the Athena blend. And it was one of my favorite blends. I put them in these blue capsules. I sent some out to some of my customers like last year, but since I found this last bottle that I forgot I had, I realized how much I love those things. And you know how many different proprietary blends I've gone through in the past to try to get a few I like. That one has a whole variety of different things. Actually had basically the main ingredients in that one that I found useful, and I'll share my recipe with you. L-theanine, guarana, ashwagandha extract, lion's mane extract, Bacopa monnieri, Mucuna pruriens, and L-tyrosine. And those combined in the right ratios turn out to be phenomenal. This was in a peony blend, which was a capsule blend I made with Kratom, and I didn't ever sell that one because I was afraid that selling Kratom in capsule blend form would attract too much attention from the DEA, because that was back a couple of years ago. I guess in the long run it didn't matter. And then the evening blend, Pasithea was the one I made, but if you ever want to make an evening blend that might help you sleep, because a lot of people have problems with that, I used canna, Mitragyna speciosa, blue lotus, turmeric, black pepper, and saffron. That was my combination. And you may ask, well, what is canna? Do you mean cannabis? No, I mean canna. Canna is also known as Scaledium tortuosum. I believe I have some over here. And it can come in kind of a rough cut form. This is the smoker's blend, which is kind of a rough powder. But it also comes in like a finer powder. Canna is a small shrub, or basically a ground cover plant, native to, I believe, Southeast Asia. And it is almost like a succulent, I believe. And the plant is, it contains, what is it? I didn't do any research on that. I think it was mesembrine and mesembrenone or something. These two ingredients which seem to act like an SSRI, or more like an SRI in the body or in the brain. And an SRI, of course, for those who don't know, is a serotonin reuptake inhibitor, meaning that it allows more serotonin to remain in your body, which can help with mood problems, things like that. I actually have this book with me. It's probably got it in it. It's the Encyclopedia of Psychoactive Plants. It's a great book. I'm on the Kratom page right now for when I get to Kratom. But before, I'll just node the rest of these off. If anybody's ever tried stone orchid powder, I'm very curious, because I have some and I haven't figured out what it's good for. Cola nut. I also have guayusa, which is, it's interesting. It's a tea leaf. So I've got these, these nicely folded leaves that were dried. And these are high xanthine or high caffeine tea from South America. It is interesting and it tastes pretty good, but it's alas just tea, just caffeine. But apparently the natives down there say that they would drink this tea before ayahuasca ceremonies, and it would lend a blue color to their visuals or hallucinations during their trips. So it does have some sort of effect, and a lot of different caffeines can affect you differently. A lot of people don't realize that drinking coffee, for example, the reason why coffee tends to give people the jitters where tea doesn't is because coffee doesn't contain L-theanine. That was one of the ingredients I named off on that. Because of the guarana and the caffeine in the capsules, I add L-theanine, which helps your body metabolize the caffeine differently, and it has a longer and more mellow effect instead of jittery and short-lived. Don't ask me why. I can't get into the details on this one. Maybe another time. But, the last capsule blend I have first is my flu blend, which I made this a couple of years ago when there was a bad flu going around. It's called What the Flu. And I found that these are amazing. I used chaga, reishi, cordyceps, ginger, and turmeric, and rhodiola, and then some garlic powder. So that was a really useful one. So those are good ingredients to add for anything to help with the colds or flu or sickness. And the very last thing I wanted to share before I talk about Kratom was these, because I mentioned all the other mushrooms. But this is cordyceps, and usually I order cordyceps in a powdered form, and it's grown on a rice or a oat or grain substrate, and that makes it more affordable. Because traditionally cordyceps grows on a bug, on a worm, on a caterpillar, and that's very expensive to produce, And so to get the natural constituents of the, out of it, you can't really wild cultivate it because it grows high in Tibet. But here's what we've got in this little thing right here. This is Cordyceps militaris growing on silkworm. Look at that. Crazy or what? So I ordered this. It was like, I think $20, $15-20 for just this much. So it's not a whole lot of stuff, but it's with the silkworm, I just thought it was such a novelty. I might even put them up on the website. But this is a mortar and pestle, and you're just supposed to put the whole bug and everything and just grind it up in the mortar and pestle and then make a tea out of it. I'm going to see if I'm brave enough to try it sometime. Over here I also have cannabis, which I don't even need to talk about because everybody knows the benefits of cannabis. I mean, that has its whole other world. But then there's kratom. I have this beautiful, we found these purple cups and these little like saucer, like serving things at the home rebuilding and resale center the other day. I was like, we just bought like $20 worth, like 20 of them. They're such cool cups. But anyhow, the kratom that's in there, I just wanted to read you this little paragraph because most of my subscribers don't need to hear about kratom. They've heard a million things about it, and this is supposed to be kind of a general discussion of herbs that I enjoy. But I wanted to read you this passage from this book because actually the Psychoactives book has quite a lot of information on different herbs. It goes on to talk about the different indole alkaloids that are in kratom. Mitragynine, agamylosine, I'm not going to pronounce all these right. It doesn't matter. Mitraphyline, mitraversine, painenthiene, speciogeline, and it goes on and on. So it says the main active constituent, mitragynine, 66% of the total alkaloid mixture, is present especially in the leaves. Young leaves of plants of Thai origin contain 7-hydroxymitragynine, 1.6% of the total alkaloid mixture. I haven't really heard that from anyone else. I didn't realize that Thai plants were the ones that had the 7-hydroxymitragynine, and I wonder if that has more addictive potential than mitragynine itself. I don't know. And if this sounds like Greek to you, I apologize. This is just for the kind of like, I guess, the people who are interested in the specifics of it here. But it says, mitragynine is chemically related to psilocybin and other ergot alkaloids. I'll read that again, because that was interesting. Mitragynine is chemically related to psilocybin and other ergot alkaloids. And for those who don't know, ergot alkaloids are used to make LSD. And psilocybin is psychedelic mushrooms. Let's see. Mitraphyline and isomitraphyline belong to the yohimbine type. The fresh leaves also contain epicathecene. Several flavonoids are present in the dried leaves. Both dried and fresh leaves have been found to contain ursolic acid. I think that's about all the information. It goes on to talk about the effects. It says, the literature says, the constituents indicate that the effects of kratom are simultaneously stimulating like those of coca and sedating like those of opium. And I don't know how else you would really define it. I would say more like coffee, but maybe that's to just kind of belittle the actual benefits of it. Anyhow, there's a whole other chapter in there on canna, a whole chapter on ashwagandha, and a variety and wealth of information to be found online. But if I went into that in detail here, it wouldn't do much good. I just wanted to kind of cover bases and figured it would turn into a long video, and it did. So I wish you all the best of days, and if you have any questions, well, don't ask me. No, I'm just kidding. You can leave a comment. I'll try to answer it. Specific herb-related questions are difficult, dosage advice, that kind of stuff I just don't answer. And that's the problem. It's become very difficult to navigate the herb world with so much misinformation and so many people who jump on the bandwagon to say, oh, this product's popular, so I'm just going to sell it and make a fortune. And dishonesty runs rampant in all industries. So really it's about personal, anecdotal experience and evidence. But at the same time, that leaves us open to placebo effect. And placebo effect is huge. So many people have said, well, I took this herb for a certain period of time and it worked for me, but you find out that maybe it wasn't even the herb you thought you were taking. And the power of suggestion is much stronger than the power of our ability to overcome those suggestions, which sometimes is fine. And that's what makes it difficult. I don't want to say this herb doesn't do this or does do this, because for somebody maybe it does, and for somebody else maybe it doesn't. And maybe the person is creating their own health, and maybe the nocebo or placebo effect is working because of that. who is anyone to step in and stop that and, convince them otherwise? So those are some things to consider. When we tell somebody that an herb or a medicine really doesn't work, we have to remember everybody's chemistry is different. All we can do is try. But there is some science behind a lot of these herbs that shows how they can be useful. And my belief is that taking these mushrooms can be immensely useful for anybody who might be battling cancers and wants some sort of to make at least an effort on their own behalf, to not have to take horrible medications or go through chemotherapy, or maybe at the stages where it's early enough to catch, to at least try large doses. But one thing I'd like to say is often when it comes to cancer, the doses that are used to treat are much larger than the average dose that's stated on the package. So, like when you're taking a chaga extract, you may need several grams or more each day or several times a day to achieve your desired results. Same thing with boswellia. People are taking that to help fight cancer. That's basically the tree sap that is also known as frankincense. And that has promise as well. Ashwagandha, for example, it even says in this book that often the doses suggested are about 250 milligrams, which is a quarter gram. Whereas it says that the purported beneficial dosage for anti-anxiety effects is basically, it was 100 milligrams per kilogram. I think it came out to like 8 to 10 grams for me. So that would be like 2 full tablespoons, which is not how much I take. So if a person's looking for real benefits, you have to know the dosages. And that's a lot more difficult. So I think that's all I got for today. I wish you all the best. And maybe at the end of this video, maybe I'll run over and take a few pictures and close-ups of some of this stuff, and maybe not. We'll see. Be well. I'll talk to you all soon. And I hope you learned something. Take care. Thanks for coming to Carpo's channel, yo.